Every skincare brand sells you like, this is a miracle in a jar that ages you backwards 10 years. What was so clear to me from the beginning is the promise that beauty brands make is not what happens with the product. We're told things that aren't true. When you tell people that this will change everything and it doesn't, then they don't trust you.
So you guys are over 200 million in sales, and it's year 5.
We launched in January of 2021 on direct to consumer. We did $100,000 our first day.
Made some good decisions and you made some bad decisions. I need some bad ones.
The single biggest mistake I think that marketers make. People think there's a playbook, which I think is one of the most dangerous things you can do. I watched as almost every single beauty brand dropped through the floor.
That's crazy.
And I think so much, especially for young women, is like, don't assume that anybody knows more than you. Just say yes and go.
I want my whole team to listen to this episode. It's so you're very wise.
Welcome.
Thank you.
I'm so excited to have you here and let people into our deep professional sessions.
I'm nervous already.
Okay, before we talk about Merit and the amazing things you've done there, can you just give us like a little background on you and how you kind of even got a role like that at such a young age?
This wasn't the plan. I think it's the first thing. I never had a grand vision of what I would do. I was supposed to go to law school. I had a sociology degree, which you don't really do anything with. And I fell into marketing because I got a coordinator level role, learned how to do social media, and then worked at 7 startups that failed.
Wow.
Nice.
All for different reasons, like product market fit, founder, funding, a million reasons. And then I met the founders of Missouri, who had kind of just launched the brand and, built that very large in 4 years, and then had the opportunity to work on Merit and took the role. So I became a CMO at age 30, which is early, but I had also become a director of marketing at 23. So I had a bit of a quick start into more senior roles because I worked at smaller brands, and then it just kind of built over time.
What do you think it was about like you or your skill set that got you that at such a young age though?
What an uncomfortable question. So
self-reflect.
I know. The amount of time you spend doing this. First is the ability to scale emotionally quickly. I think that nobody talks about that enough. I think becoming a manager at 23 was really eye-opening for me. I was managing 8 people, and I very quickly realized how emotionally ill-equipped I was because you're dealing with everybody's feelings and their growth and what they're looking for. So very quickly you have to build the ability to lead, and that is a whole other skill set that I think a lot of people don't appreciate. At the same time, I was really fortunate on timing. I started my career in the early 2010s, so it was, the year Instagram came out. I was there when Facebook ads launched, so I learned that. I learned influencer marketing before there was a single platform. I was doing YouTube brand collaborations. So my timing was also really fortunate because I learned the hard skills very quickly as things launched, and it was in the decade when marketing completely changed. So the conflation of those two things, scaling emotionally really quickly and timing for hard skills, I think is what landed me here. And CMO is a tricky role today because if you think of a legacy CMO, it's really hard to scale a digitally native organization if you've never worked in the platforms. So then you have this gap between younger leadership and C-suite, much more experienced leadership that's actually really hard to manage in a business that is scaling as fast as a Merit.
So you're at Missouri, you're pretty senior there, and you get this opportunity for Merit. I know you didn't even live in LA yet, and it was out in LA. So like, how does that come to be? Like Catherine Power just like calls you, or like, how do you go from that to Merit before it's even a product?
And tell the audience about like a one-liner on Merit too, for those that don't know. I'm sure most do. But.
Yeah. Sure. I'll give the context first. So I was at Missouri from 2016 to 2020. Very rapid direct consumer growth. And the way that I grew in that business is I was the first marketing hire, so I was the only person. So what I would do is I would learn something like, Facebook ads, and then I would hire someone once I'd scaled it to do that thing. So my progression was very natural to go from 0 reports to, I think I had 20 reports by the time that I left. So I kind of learned each thing, moved on, hired someone, and that allowed me to kind of develop both of those skills. When I first got contacted about Merit, it was mid-2019. Catherine had seen my work. Actually, she made the comment that I can't escape the marketing from Missouri. She was like, it's everywhere. I don't know how you're doing this. And she called me and told me she was working on a beauty brand. And I had this moment of like, why? Because everyone was working on a beauty brand. It was like in 2019, it was once a week there was a new celebrity or an influencer or a makeup artist. And it still feels that way today, but it's actually a lot less frequent than it was then. So I was like, that's super cool. What a huge compliment, but I'm really happy with what I'm building. And 6 months later, I was standing in a Sephora around Christmas trying to do shopping. And I had this really clear moment of understanding what a beauty brand could be that was different, which was seeing that like all the sets that were there for the holidays were like big brush sets with 10 brushes that nobody knows how to use. Or the eyeshadow suitcases were out that year.
Wow.
Nobody knows how to use 150 eyeshadows. And I had this really clear connection of like, I'm standing here and I had worked at a beauty counter for 10 years putting myself through school. And if I don't know how to use it, then how does anybody else know how to use this? And that was a really interesting unlock for me. And in the same trip, I was looking around at the images, and one of the skincare models was a friend of mine, and I knew she was 22, and it was an anti-aging ad. It was such a clear moment of being like, why is so-and-so in an ad about anti-aging when she hasn't aged? And then there was a really clear visual discrepancy too for me on how are we speaking to millennials and Gen X? Because at the time, and by the way, still today, everything new is for Gen Z or now Gen Alpha. No one was speaking to that consumer. So it's a very simple proposition that Merit is a brand that simplifies what it takes to get ready, that it is built for millennials and Gen X. But that is a completely different proposition than anything else that has been launched in the market. So I signed on in early 2020. I was living in Toronto. And to Lana's point, I signed my contract. A month and a half later, COVID happened and everybody stopped wearing makeup. I had no apartment because I had given it up to move to LA. They closed the border. So I couldn't go from Canada to here. So I had to move to my parents in the small town where I grew up. So most of the work that I did on Merit from then until launch was from my parents' home office.
Wow.
Which was a very big pivot for someone that had been independent their entire life. And then I moved to the US in February of 2021. So almost the exact same time that Lana did.
I mean, you make this point about like how other brands were talking about selling anti-aging products but using youthful faces. How did you, before coming into a brand as a CMO, think about like, what is this product as somebody who is also like one of historically the most youngest CMOs out there? How do you put yourself into that positioning?
Yeah. I mean, I think I felt it, which I realize sounds ridiculous. But I mean, I was in my late 20s when I started working on Merit. I guess I would have been 27. And even at that age, I was like, this doesn't make any sense for me. And then as I spoke to my friends more and more, and we're actually doing a campaign on this next month, really talking about the complexities of aging, you realize that A, nobody really talks about it. B, every skincare brand sells you like, this is a miracle in a jar that ages you backwards 10 years. Like, what was so clear to me from the beginning is the promise that beauty brands make is not what happens with the product. And half of the frustration with the industry is because we're told things that aren't true. So in building Merit, it wasn't necessarily that I had to have the lived experience of really experiencing aging. But what I had to understand was when you tell people that this will change everything and it doesn't, then they don't trust you. So much of the language of Merit was saying like, this is a great foundation stick. It'll cover your breakouts. It'll cover fine lines. Is it going to airbrush you or make you look like a different person? No. And so much of that trust relationship with the consumer is based on being honest. It's very simple. It's very radical when you're building a relationship.
If you've ever thought about starting a company or you're already in it and figuring things out as you go, I wrote Bootstrap Empire for you. It's the real story of how we built Bala from a scrappy side hustle into a global brand, without a traditional playbook or unlimited capital. This book has the lessons and advice I wish I had from day one. Think of it as your mentor in a book format. Bootstrap Empire is out now and available on Amazon, Walmart, Target, Barnes & Noble, and more. If you're building something from scratch, this one's for you. Visit bootstrap-empire.com to learn more.
And then let's talk pricing strategy really quick, because this is something you guys did that's very unique, right? Like you definitely went out and said, okay, we're going to speak to an older audience, but you priced quite low. And yet I think you're still considered a luxury brand. Like, why did you do that? And how could you think about doing that in terms of like longer term profitability?
The first thing that we really looked at was how do you think about the customer's consumption? So let me give you two anecdotes that really inform pricing. The first is when I worked at the counter, Canadian dollar is obviously 30% more. So everything feels a bit more extreme. There was a really beautiful designer foundation that launched. And when it launched, I was selling it to every client that came in, and they'd try it on and they were like, wow, this is so amazing. I love this so much. And then we'd get to the cash register and it was $68. And they would have this moment of like, oh, it's $68. And they'd be like, oh, it's okay, I'll save it for like weddings and stuff, like special occasions. That's a really interesting psychology because it wasn't that they couldn't afford to buy it. It's that the price point felt like something that couldn't be used every day. And that's what luxury tends to be positioned as. So much of the positioning was, let me take a step back from pricing and think of habit. How do I drive consistent purchasing and for people to finish a product and come back? And then pricing becomes part of that infrastructure because you have to look at what price point is, one, going to have a good contribution margin so that I can build a profitable business, but two, psychologically is going to be safe enough for the consumer to buy and use every single day. And ultimately, I mean, we started, I think, our lowest priced product was $24. It went up into the $40s. Today, our fragrance is $92. But we have maintained pricing on all of our key SKUs and focused on affordability because I think value more than ever is what people are looking for. And I don't want to achieve that through discounting. We don't do constant sales. We don't have a welcome code. You know, whenever friends text me about product, I'm like, there's no secret code. That's really on purpose because that's also what protects your margin. And I think people forget that in their pricing structure.
No welcome code is radical for sure.
Yeah.
But so you guys are over 200 million in sales and it's year 5, but you launched with a celebrity. Like, did you launch and it was immediate success? Like, walk us through those early years. Like, when did you have that huge revenue bump? What worked?
It was more gradual, I would say. So we launched in January of 2021 on direct to consumer. We did $100,000 our first day. The way that we did that is super unconventional. So in October of 2020, we launched a mood board. It was called At Mood. And we were not posting that it was going to be a brand. There was no like face. It was really just images that inspired us and curating what the story would be. And so much of building a brand, I think, people think there's a playbook, which I think is one of the most dangerous things you can do. So how do you build something that's not just niche? And in the one time I think in my career that I've used my sociology degree, there's this insight that always stuck with me, mostly because it was so hard to digest, which was that women in their late teens have the most time they'll ever have. And they lose time every single year to themselves, from their 20s up into their 30s. There's a few inflection points. So first, when they start their careers, they lose time and they change their aesthetic. They move much more into a polished professional look as opposed to something more expressive. Then maybe they get a partner and they lose half the counter space and they have less time. And then maybe they choose to have kids and you have way less time. On the continuum, that time doesn't come back until 65. And that is a relatively universal experience regardless of where you are or what your habits are or what your career is. So we built a brand not on a front-facing founder, but on a problem that we could solve that had a universal emotion. So that made it so much more scalable. So as we built out the Instagram to kind of test what would really work with people, it was very clear when I tested anything with time that people were engaging more. So we launched with the 5-minute morning, which was a decision that was driven both by identifying that, but also unit economics. Because anybody that's run a direct-to-consumer business knows that you have to have the average order value to outweigh the customer acquisition cost. The reason most beauty businesses don't have successful direct-to-consumer businesses is because their average price point is in the 30s, and then they don't sell a routine, so you can't actually have an acquisition cost. So by selling the 5-minute morning routine, suddenly you have $120 average order value, which means that I have tons of space to play on acquiring consumers. So we launched with that. We did $100,000 that first day, and then 1 month later we went into Sephora. We launched into 30 doors. So our seed funding covered 30 end cap builds. And then we had built so much momentum. It was a bit of the right moment, candidly, to be launching a brand that was minimalist beauty positioning. But we had so much momentum, we sold out really quickly, which was actually a huge problem because we had to then have the funding to go buy more product, right? Because you have to, if you think of how long beauty products take to make, generally it's about a year, unless you're airing it, and then it's 8 months.
That's crazy.
Mm-hmm. So you pivot into this, okay, we have to get product so quickly, but I have to buy the product. And then the business is doing really well. So then Sephora wants to give you more space, which means you have to buy more end caps, which are expensive. So we raised our Series A in September of 2021, so 9 months after launching.
How much?
$20 million.
Wow.
And we had all worked at enough businesses to understand how hard raising is and also how much more complex it gets as you grow, right? So we raised much more than we needed. It was very intentional. We were profitable from the very beginning. It was just about funding the things that would help us to expand. And then after that, we knew that we would be set to continue to build long term. So The first year was around 10 million in sales, which was much more than we had initially anticipated. And then every year kind of built on it. There wasn't a single year that was, really outsized. To go from 10 to 200 over 5 years was just all the gradual increments in between.
And how much in total did you raise? Over just 20?
20 plus seed.
Okay.
And then that's it. So that Series A was in 2021 and we haven't raised since.
Did you know that diapers are one of the most common things found in landfills? And most of them are basically plastic that takes over 400 years to break down. Most diapers are actually also bleached. I'm so happy I found the first and only unbleached diapers, Hero, Hiro. No fragrances, no lotions, no dyes. These are the only thing you should be putting your baby in, truly. And they're so insanely soft, and they use this really cool fungi technology to break down the plastic once they're in landfills. You're insane if you're using any other diapers besides Hero. Use code Natalie for a special offer, and you can visit herodiapers.com/Natalie.
Okay, I want to talk a bit about the actual branding and marketing of it.
Sure.
I feel like, at least my experience with Merit, whilst it's everywhere and like it's very well known, it's very intentional and refined in the way that it markets. Like, when you think brands are doing well, it's because you're being bombarded with like 100 influencer ads, right? Like, I don't get that from Merit. I just like see the things that it's doing. Can you talk to me about the decision to do that? And like, was there anything that you said no to that didn't feel intentional? And can you share any of those? You got to give us some gossip. That's why you're here. But yeah, talk to us about that positioning and how it's worked, because it wouldn't work for a lot of people and brands.
No. I mean, I think the first thing I always say when I'm talking about what worked for us is that like so many of these decisions were not made because I knew this would be the answer, right? It was a gut instinct, and I was right sometimes and I was wrong sometimes, and it doesn't apply to all businesses. So that's my disclaimer always. I think not launching in 2020 was the best thing we ever did. We were supposed to launch in late 2020. And it gave me, for the first time in my career, a year of working behind the scenes, right? Because I started in early 2020. We launched in early 2021. And in that year, I watched as almost every single beauty brand dropped through the floor because their marketing didn't fit the step change that happened during COVID. So for example, if you had a core Hero SKU that was 80% of your business, which was the logic at the time that was how you built, and let's say it was a foundation or a matte lipstick, that customer completely disappeared overnight. So in that year, I became a student. And I think we combined a few different things. Before we got into marketing and branding, it was understanding how are we going to build a diversified business so that doesn't happen to us. The first thing was not having a Hero product. And that kind of broke every investor's brain at the beginning, because to say like, no, there's no Hero, it's a routine and we're building a brand, did not make any sense. Because if you think of even most brands today, how they're built and how they're launches, you just see them talk about the one product, you come in on that product, and then maybe you repeat into other ones. We don't do that. Very intentional. There's no one product collection at Merit that is more than 20% of sales. That's not a coincidence.
What
That's
products
on
were the
purpose.
routine?
So there were 7 products total when we launched. Today, by the way, we only have, I think, 17. So in the 5 years since, we've launched 10. So we have not launched a ton of collections. It included the Minimalist, our foundation stick, and all makeup, essentially. We launched into skincare in 2022 and fragrance in 2024. But we had the opportunity to essentially engineer risk. So that was the first decision. The second was, I'm not going to spend more than 30% of my marketing budget on any one platform. I had watched in the 2010s when new algorithms come in and you see every marketer do the exact same thing, which is Facebook CAC is really inexpensive, so move 90% of your budget there and see how it goes. And then when that algorithm changes, you're cooked, because you can't possibly move fast enough to move on to a new program to find the growth that you were finding. And I experienced that live. I saw when Facebook CACs went up, when influencer marketing was no longer converting in the same way, and it moved to more of an EMV compared to a ROAS style program. I saw it happen live. So that was a rule from the very beginning, that there is no silver bullet and we won't try and make one. And the third was to have a diversified customer. So to not be like, have a face and this is the plan and this is where we're going. The single biggest mistake I think that marketers make, to your point about feeling like you see Merit everywhere, we have 11% brand awareness in the US. The thing that I see happen over and over again is marketers believe the hype within the bubble in which they live. America is huge. As someone that moved here from Canada, I'm always floored by how many people live here. If you think about where most of our marketing spend goes, it is not New York or LA, which is why it feels so much less overwhelming and why most people don't know how big we are, because it's all happening in the background. So once you have those business principles you go into the branding and marketing, right? So first was the visuals. It was very clear to us from the beginning that one, this really refined 90s aesthetic is where we wanted to go. Nostalgia feels safe. And for our client, the 90s and the early 2000s reminds them of a time that they felt safe. It's a very simple psychological principle, but that's how we decided to move. This was also 2020, so you have to remember at this time, a beauty Instagram was like macro, hyper-saturated, ultra-edited photos that were very sexy. And I remember being in like meetings and having like a lip gloss with a super inappropriate name and feeling like there was this huge disconnect between who I was as a customer and how I was being marketed to. And then as we built out kind of the ethos and the way we spoke, it was very much, how do you build a brand that if you saw an image and you take Merit and the product out, you know that it's Merit? That is really different to build than to just build product recognition. And then how do you build sentiment? It's the thing that I think every marketer forgets today is there's a funnel and there's, you know, your CPMs and then your CPCs and then they convert and then what's your retention and then that is the hyperloop and then we'll project out a 5-year plan. That doesn't matter if nobody feels something when they see your marketing. So finding a way to tell stories in a way that resonated with that audience is still the secret to success today.
So I know you said there's no silver bullet, but
There's
what
really not.
is working now? Like influencer, what's working for you guys?
A million little things. TV is actually working really well for us, linear TV. Influencer marketing still works. It's just different, right? Like, I think there's this idea that the people that are influential are the people that are going to be like shiny in New York and are super brand aligned and cool. That's not actually who we trust to tell us about products. The single biggest unlock at the beginning for influencer, I had no performance marketing budget. All I did was seed, and I did not seed to beauty influencers. Because if you think about how influence works, if I'm telling you every single week the 9 foundations I like, you don't believe me. If I'm a fitness influencer and I show you one that I tried and I'm super excited about it, you believe me. So much of the strategy at the beginning was like, I see where everybody else is going, and I'm not going to do that. And I think the secret for marketers is you have to remember that everything is an auction-based system, right? So in marketing, you're competing with other marketers. So every single article that you read that is telling you that like, oh, this is the white space, every marketer is also reading that. So I've always used data in the opposing way. Every time a retailer is telling me Gen Z is where you need to be, I know they're telling everybody else. Every time an article is saying that TikTok is what's going to scale your business, I know I need to do the opposite. So I take data, I love data, and then I ignore it, and I go in the opposite direction where nobody else is going. The shocking thing in all of this is that continues to happen. We are at huge scale, and people are still ignoring the client that we talk to. So as long as we keep that mentality, there's always space.
That might be some of the best advice I've heard on marketing ever. Seriously.
It's true.
She's pretty
That's
smart.
why we just looked at each other like
We're like,
our
"Fuck,
brain broke.
every company I want to start, I need to change.
Well, you
No,
have
it's
to,
just really good
you
advice.
have to remember marketers are competing with marketers.
Yeah.
I want my whole team to listen to this episode. It's so you're very wise.
You did say that, you know, this isn't advice that everybody should take because all brands are different, and you also like made some good decisions and you made some bad decisions. I need some bad ones.
Oh, I can give you many bad ones. All the way back in my career, by the way. It usually was lack of product market fit. So, for example, we built this whole campaign in the back end. It was actually at Missouri, where we built an e-commerce functionality for same-day delivery for Valentine's Day. But when we launched it, we hadn't figured out the targeting for the marketing. So we had like put all this time and effort into building it on the site. And then we got almost no orders because we hadn't actually figured out how to like market it and storytell it. We also made one really bad assumption, which is that men would purchase for Valentine's Day in advance. They don't.
They definitely don't.
They don't. It was every single year. I cannot tell you how many emails would come on like February 13th, which would be like, I ordered this. Is it going to get here tomorrow? And we'd be like, no.
Bro.
And that's where retail for gifting becomes so important, because if you actually think about consumer behavior, we like to say that like 2 months in advance, I'm thinking of gifts. That's not how it works. It's the same with Cyber Monday, by the way. It's the greatest fallacy that over Thanksgiving, people are buying gifts for other people. They're self-shopping. They're buying gifts for other people in mid-December or later. So understanding the disconnect of how people actually shop versus what you think you're building, huge unlock. There have been campaigns, I try and fail small. So when we launch a big campaign,
I mean, don't we all? No one wants to fail big.
but if we launch, I don't try new things on a big campaign. Like if I'm putting a ton of money behind a product, 1, I've tested that product everywhere. 2, I know what messaging is going to work. 3, I've like done little tests. So when we launch a new region, for example, we like to do direct to consumer, then retail, because I spend a year running ads to be like, What tagline's working? What's not resonating? What do I need to localize? What do I not need to localize? What kinds of influencers are working here and what kind aren't? Those types of insights at low spends, you can learn so much at low risk. And as we've entered into new regions, we've had tough lessons early. But because we do that so far ahead of retail launches, it doesn't actually matter. So the reason I always share that, like, I worked at 7 startups that failed before I've now gone on to work at 2 highly successful ones is I think it's important context to understand that I have learned so much more from failure than I ever learned from things going well. And I have a huge tolerance on my team for things not going right because you cannot innovate or grow quickly if you don't give people that permission.
Yeah, you probably learned a lot of what not to do before your 2 successful companies.
And the other thing is when you're working with really high-performing people that care, you generally don't need to say anything when they don't get it right. Because they're usually like, this really didn't do what I thought it was going to do. And you let them own it, take the accountability, move on to the next thing. Like, you don't need to push people on that.
This is maybe getting too tactical, but you did mention like not having influencer budget and kind of relying on seeding a lot in the beginning.
Yeah.
Like, what kind of margins do you think a brand has to have to make that possible? Because I think people also don't think about like, okay, sure, like I can seed my product, but if your product costs $50 to make, like
Totally.
it's $100 to seed 2 people, right? So like, how do you think about margin? Can you share your guys' margins?
No.
Okay.
Definitely
How do you
not.
think about margin?
This is not
Or
Shark
how should
Yeah,
one
yeah.
think about margin so that they can rely on seeding if they don't have influencer budget?
Totally. So back to the pricing architecture, you cannot take back margin. I think the thing that I always hear people say is like, oh, the margins will get better over time. They do a little bit, a few percent. But what you set out in the beginning is what it's going to be long term. And by the way, price increases are very hard to do, right? People don't react well to them. So having it right at the beginning is key. If you have a product that's so expensive that you can't seed it, then you need to figure out your product. That to me is a fundamental change. On seeding, again, I think everybody makes the same mistake, right? Which is like, I'm a marketer, so I look at where all the other marketers are sending product, and then those are the people I send product to. That's a terrible idea.
Yeah.
The single greatest reviews and reposts and people that engage with product are your customers or people who are not being sent free product all the time. I always think of this Britney Spears quote where she was like, once I got rich, everybody started sending me free product. That doesn't make any sense if you think about it because you have so much access. When we first started with influencers, I don't think an influencer with a huge reach was really going to care to be sent something by a small beauty brand. We did micro. We sent it to people who had engaged audiences, they had a few thousand followers, and they loved the product and appreciated it and gave us feedback. And by the way, so I started doing that in October of 2020 ahead of the January 2021 launch. I had 3 months of learning, so I was already updating products before we launched into the market because I had feedback on like, you need a shade here, or this is working, or this isn't working. It was a conversation. I think influencer marketing, I always think, can't tell you how many platforms I get pitched on any given day that'll solve influencer marketing. And I think it is such crap because influencer marketing is word of mouth. Right? It's a conversation. So if you're not treating those people like your customers who you're learning from, who you're having dialogue with, then how are they ever going to feel bought in? So if you look at the seating boxes today where people show like a tower of 50 boxes behind them and they open them really quickly and show you one product, I totally get people don't have time to show you things for free if that's their job. But people who you send something to where it's meaningful are so much more likely to show it in a way that is actually going to make people interested in the brand. So again, it's like get outside of the bubble of what you think influencer should be. Because influencer to me is just word of mouth friend marketing on the internet.
And what does your marketing team look like right now?
So I build it based on the ultimate KPI of the department. So I oversee creative, product, full end-to-end brand experience marketing. So for example, the way that I have marketing split is I have a brand team. Their KPIs are brand awareness, EMV, and sentiment, right? So on that team, I have partnerships, EMV influencer, so influencer without a return, community, PR. That all kind of lives in one place. On the D2C front is what we call it, but it's really global trackable marketing. You have e-commerce, you have performance influencer marketing. So that's influencer marketing that I'm tracking sessions to a return on ad spend investment. So that would include like affiliate marketing or paid placements. You have retention marketing, so CRM, emails, and then you have performance marketing. So all of the platforms that we're using to drive. Those all ladder up into a simple KPI, which is revenue and return on ad spend. So giving every leader of each team very simple KPIs is important, and marketers cannot have competing KPIs. So putting EMV influencer separate from return on ad spend influencer is very intentional because those are 2 completely different things, right? Like you can't say, okay, I need you to generate the best return on ad spend you can, but also grow brand awareness because those are completely in competition with each other. So give really simple goals, split out things so they're specialized. And I have never hired generalists. I don't have any on my teams. I only hire people with very specific skill sets. I am the only generalist in the org, which is super intentional.
And it's now 100 people total, the company.
Yeah.
And that's across New York and LA?
New York, LA, we actually have a lot of people in Toronto because I've hired a lot of people that I worked with before. And then our field team is spread across the US and Canada that do support and coaching in stores.
Got it.
And Paris now too. We have an international team.
Oh, yeah, of course.
And are you just in Sephora or are you in a whole range of wholesale?
Today, we are only direct consumer in Sephora,
Okay.
which is super intentional. I mean, as you guys would know very well, every time you add a retailer, you add operational complexity. So first is the operational complexity has to be outweighed by the revenue that would be driven because then you need headcount to support it. Second is having a clean way to own consumer data. I think price discipline and owning data is incredibly important, and people forget that. So having just direct consumer in Sephora, I mean, Sephora is obviously a massive business. We still have so much space to grow, and they've been a phenomenal partner. But also, if we were in a million different retailers, how can you build a direct consumer business?
Is there a D2C tool you would shout out, like a Shopify tool, like or Shop My, like?
Yeah, Peel. Peel is my favorite. I love data. Peel is a cohort analytics that you plug into Shopify. It's really inexpensive. We actually started using it at the beginning before we had anybody that worked in data. And I'm very much focused on both, obviously, being profitable on first acquisition, but also acquiring the right consumer. So that tool has been hugely important to us in terms of identifying and onboarding the right consumer on a platform level.
And how do you define who the right consumer is?
Usually it's the AOV to LTV. So are you coming in at an AOV that means you're going to repeat? I'll put this in Missouri terms, is actually the simplest way of saying it. If you come and buy a diamond necklace, I know that as a client, you're probably going to come back because you're buying a product that is 14 karat gold. It's solid. It's going to wear forever. You're going to wear it every day. You're willing to invest up front. You're likely to repeat because you're going to have a great experience. If you're coming and buying the 5-minute morning routine, I know because you bought 7 products, you're very likely to come back because the chances of you liking some of the 7 are much higher than if you only bought 1. So if you buy a routine, I know you're going to be a customer that's more likely to come back or is more bought into the ethos. If you only buy 1, you're probably testing, you're not 100% sure, you're not 100% bought in. It doesn't mean over time that means they don't become great consumers, but at the beginning, when you're small, you only have space for the high AOV consumer. As you scale, you then have to bifurcate the high AOV consumer, because there aren't that many of those, and then start to bring in the consumer that's going to buy less, but it's still a really important part of scaling the business.
Partnerships. You guys, so most brands, I think, use partnerships because they want access to audience, right?
Yeah.
That's how people do partnerships. It's like, I want to unlock your, however, 500,000 followers or whatever it might be. You guys do not do partnerships that way. Like you just did a partnership with Donnie, which you and I, we probably all love. I would say they're a very small LA brand and they live within the bubble of like who we know and like.
Totally.
Most Merit consumers probably don't even know who they are if you aren't focusing on LA and New York. Like why?
So partnerships live under brand, which is sentiment and EMV and impressions for a reason. I think partnerships became this way of doing acquisition marketing for less. Right? Consumers aren't stupid. They know when it is. And I think the single thing that we've always believed in is that partnerships are an expression of your values and your quality. So the signature bag, for instance, the first collaboration we did was Proenza Schuler. The reason for that is because I remember reading fashion magazines as a teenager into my early 20s and never being able to afford the bag, right? And if you think of fashion and beauty, they've always been very separate, which doesn't actually make much sense. So having Proenza Schuler design a bag that you get free with your purchase is a way to have this luxury experience at a price point that you can actually afford and invite people into. We chose them because the PS bag, 20 years ago, I was like obsessed with.
Same.
I've always built this incredible brand. 2 people who are, I mean, obviously they now have a new creative director, but at the time had really built this American sportswear brand that I thought was amazing positioning. So much of our partnerships is not this like logical thing. It's very much from falling in love with the product and feeling like our audience would love it too. Tove was the next brand we worked with, London-based, smaller. We chose them because I had ordered a jacket online. And you know when you order an expensive jacket and it comes and you feel it and you're like, this isn't even like a natural material. Like this is polyamide and I spent how much on this? So I bought this Tove jacket off of Net-a-Porter. And it arrived and it was 100% lamb's wool and it was so beautifully made. And then I looked it up and it was made in the UK. And I was like, why is this such a pleasant surprise that this brand has such amazing quality? When we launched in the UK, I met Camille and Holly, who were the founders, fell in love with them, really loved their ethos, how they were thinking about it, what they were making. And from there, we decided to make a collaboration. So it was very much like this organic thing of falling in love and then giving the consumer access to that feeling. Donnie, same thing. I've always loved Alyssa's work. We always wanted to do a sweatshirt. I think that building things that were made ethically was important to us. Obviously, we are partially LA-based, so having something made in LA was really meaningful for us. And partnerships to me are not about establishing reach. It's about establishing sentiment and connection, which I think is the thing that most people miss.
Okay, we need to wrap up. So a personal question to close.
All right.
You're 25. What advice would you give yourself some kind of coming in for the first time?
Oh, can I tell you, I hate when people give advice because usually it's coming from a place of having already figured a lot of things out. I wish I was nicer to myself at 25. I think that maybe you see a podcast like this and it feels like it's been so easy and clear. And for me, it was so nonlinear. And so much of building a successful career was finding a way to be happy with myself. So actually, the single biggest piece of advice I have for everybody is everybody should do therapy, especially people in leadership positions, because half of the work is understanding how you show up. But also, especially for women in business, changing the self-talk about how you speak to yourself and being a little bit more forgiving, because your 20s are for getting things really wrong, taking crazy risks. And that was the backbone of how I built a career, right? There was no plan. I just figured things out as I went, and I said yes to so many things I didn't know how to do. I had one interview where they were like, do you know how to build a landing page? And I was like, absolutely. And then that night, they were like, okay, can you deliver us a landing page tomorrow morning? I had to download Unbounce and learn how to make like a drag and drop landing page. I had no idea, but I just kept saying yes. And I think so much, especially for young women, is like, don't assume that anybody knows more than you. Just say yes and go. And you might fail, but you're going to learn something, and that's how you build a career ultimately.
Yeah. You definitely agree with that?
Oh, for sure. Say yes.
Yeah.
And then figure it out.
Yeah.
That's like how
yes
we've
to
done
everything.
to everything on Bala. Say yes and then figure it out.
Yeah.
It really works. And you miss sometimes.
Totally.
All right. We want to wrap in a hot take. Juicy hot take.
No pressure. My hot take is that every leader should do therapy. That is still a hot take. My other hot take is that there is no playbook for building a business. And I think podcasts like this are so great to learn specific experiences. But so much of what has made Merit successful is not listening to other people, knowing when to put your blinders on and just go. Go on the intuition that you think you can build something different. My other hot take is that all marketers just copy each other because they want to see what will do well in PR. That's really fun and validating, but that isn't what builds a business. So fine line there. How many more do you want?
That's good. That's great. That's great. That was super, super helpful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.